Inmate 623 from the NOSLEEP subreddit.
My name doesn't matter. Nobody's does. At least not anymore. Just know that these are the final records of Inmate 643's time in the Miskatonic Correctional Facility in Massachusetts. I hope anyone reading this will glean some information or insight into the disaster that has crippled the country. I have no more insight than anyone else, but I'll record the fall of the facility and record what befell our little corner of Massachusetts. I was one of the low-risk prisoners landed here. I was not in jail for violent crime. I was convicted of fraud, embezzlement. I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief. But I never harmed anybody. Well, especially not intentionally. We can sit here and debate my choices and how they may have harmed anyone. But our time is short. So it be suffice for me to say, I never intended to hurt anyone. I simply did not think past my short-sighted greed. The reason I tell you this is because the facility was somewhat divided. Violent and sexual offenders were kept completely separate. I was told by the guards this was to reduce the chance of lower-level criminals being exposed and to possibly be influenced by the more barbaric among us. Things were okay for prison. 3 square meals a day, a cot, and a decent amount of access to entertainment. I won't speak for the others, but for us in our little wing of assorted misfits, we weren't too tight on a leash. We generally got along fine, especially with the guards. In my line of work, a certain touch was needed, a charm and easygoing manner. I didn't meet many people I didn't get along with. Of course, it made it harder to steal from them or cheat them. But in the end, my baser instincts overcame my decency. As far as I was concerned, I was simply readjusting other people's funds to my own benefit. I didn't think of the financially shattered lives I may have left behind. Although I'll say I never took everything. In my own little black heart, I couldn't face leaving anyone with nothing. And sometimes, it was as clear as my target had a little value, just walked away, rather than leave them derelict. Time seemed to run together in the joint, and I couldn't accurately tell how long I had served until things started to go south. But it all started with the arrival of a busload of new prisoners, as the rumors go. Few of us actually saw it. Me, I didn't. Just heard the stories. As they were being transferred in a chain gang into the prison, there was some kind of scuffle, and one of the newbies was apparently bitten, a huge chunk taken out of his arm. It took several guards to restrain and hold down one scrawny-looking, slightly sickly fellow. I didn't happen to see the injured party. After a day or two of some significant medical treatment, he was allowed to join the rest of us crooks, and at first, it was fine. He had a slightly pallid demeanor and a sweet, slicked skin. His wounds seemed to be oozing despite heavy bandages, but he could hold a conversation. He was fine to me. He turned out to be a well-spoken vegan. He was in for criminal damage on a farm his animal rights group had broken into. Hardly Al Capone. In the dead of night in prison, the only thing that disturbs you from sleep faster, other than an overtly friendly cellmate, is a blaring alarm. It's unnerving the first time it happens, but you get used to it. It doesn't happen regularly, but enough that you start to desensitize yourself. This night was no different. The scuffling sounds of prison guard boots rushing towards an unknown cell, the loud complaints of inmates pulled from sweet dreams of soap and showers. I laid myself back down to bed and thought of nothing until the morning after. As it turns out, our new wounded warrior had taken a chunk out of his own cellmate's throat during the night, and then nearly gouged out the first responding guard's eye. For a vegan, it was a bloodthirsty, vicious assault. It was almost funny, dripping in irony. Of course, none of us laughed in front of the guards. Besides, we liked most of them. We had never been mistreated or abused. It was a weird atmosphere in the prison. Several similar attacks in a few days were very unusual. Then people's families began to miss visitations. These were people who traveled miles every single week without fail. No showing with zero warning. And then, adding to the tension, the same families could not be reached by phone. Weeks went by. It became clear something was going on. The TV privileges became severely restricted as reports of a strange new virus swept the country began to become a serious concern on several well-known news networks. Usually they couldn't agree about anything, yet all seemed to agree that this was disastrous. There were even rumors the injured guard had come back to work only to viciously attack one of the death row inmates. Yet we still had a sense of detachment from it all, safe, ironically, behind our little bars. This was 2 weeks ago. Since then, barely any guards show up to work, and we barely got a meal a day. Work duty canceled completely. Yard time non-existent. Then came last night. I awoke to the sound of gunshots and the sound of screams and protests, silenced by the roar of handguns and shotguns. I was afraid, truly afraid for the first time since my sentencing. The march of polished shoes approached my cell. The sweat dripped from my skin and my heart beat. The warden approached the cell, but he looked different. He was fully armored in riot gear, surrounded by a dozen officers. Blood splatter decorated the uniform, crimson swirls on the blackest night. He opened the cell doors. He beckoned to me to leave the cell. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I asked where the gunshots had come from and why. To my surprise, he was totally honest. Overwhelmingly so. He told me that the state had completely collapsed. Law and order on his deathbed, except for the violent prisoners before him and his posse were to go to his own private bunker. They decided to put down the worst of us. Violent offenders put down like dogs. I felt sick to my stomach. But if things were as bad as they said they were, I could see why they did it. There was no law anymore. Probably the country. They told me they were giving the non-violent offenders, such as me, a chance to leave. We got the supplies for a few weeks and put on a bus to figure out where to go between us. The buses were due to leave within minutes, so the warden told me to go. With a slight nod of my head, I didn't waste time. I reached the bus. I recognized most of my fellow low-risk offenders. A few were missing, but for the most part we were all there. They were arguing about where to go. Everyone was shouting at each other, cacophony of sound and fury. But that ended when a mushroom cloud bloomed over the far horizon behind us. That pretty much settled it. We were going as far away from that as possible. Some wanted to split off from the group and left without argument. Now we're in the middle of a dense forest. We broke down here last night. Some of us are keeping watch, while others went for supplies. They should have been back by now, at least according to our maps. The radio is static and dead. I wonder what kind of world we've been released into. The shock of it all hasn't quite hit me yet, but I feel it coming. It's a vibration in my brain growing stronger that I'm trying to ignore right now. In the distance of the trees, I see some figures in the dark, making their way to the bus. I can make out the sight of orange jumpsuits. Finally, the scavenger party has returned. Even if they're moving slower than usual, I guess it's time to go and welcome them back and see what this new world will bring us.